In this laundry room at her first apartment, 19-year-old Trisha Meredith was murdered April 7th, 1986.
This guy come on to her, and she told him that she didn't like his advances. And then I think that he didn't like what she said and started stabbing her, and then shoved her into this little closet space and continued to stab her 20 times and cut her throat.
This all happened behind big windows 25 years ago in front of a parking lot full of people on a spring day.
They had no clues. There was no murder weapon found. As far as DNA goes, DNA wasn't even a thing back in 86. Who knows how long this is going to take? Oh, I know he's out there, and I hope he's listening. I refuse to stop. I won't stop till the day I die.
Indianapolis, like many other cities, has its fair share of unsolved crimes and mysteries. As it seems the majority of cases I cover in this series are from the 80s, this one is no exception. In today's video, I am going to be sharing the odd and tragic details of an unsolved slaying of a 19-year-old while she was simply doing her laundry. This is the unsolved story of who killed Trisha Meredith. Before we get into the more depressing details of this story, let us get more acquainted with Trisha. Trisha K. Meredith had been dating her boyfriend David Fain for a little over a year when they decided to move in together. They had recently moved in only 2 weeks before the tornado of confusion would strike. Trisha was 19 years old at the time, and this had been her first time living away from home. Safe to say, she was starting her life. Her mom made mention that she was slightly nervous about moving out, but was overall excited to start a life with David. Trisha's family all stated that she and David always seemed to be very much in love. Apparently, Trisha and David had met while working at a grocery store in the local area. According to friends from her local high school she recently graduated from, Trisha was very well liked by just about everyone. Now that we know a bit more about Trisha and her life, let's get into the story. It was a typical day on April 7th, 1986, when Trisha and David decided to get some chores done. They went to wash their clothes in the apartment communal laundry room. From what I could find, they did this sometime around 6 p.m., and they loaded their clothes into the washing machines. Sometime around 6:15 p.m., David went back to the apartment to make a phone call to a relative. Trisha was left alone to make sure no one took their laundry. It would be a short time later at around 6:45 p.m. when David would return to the laundry room. What David walked into is something straight out of the movies. When David walked into the laundry room, he saw no sign of Trisha, but he did find blood absolutely everywhere. There was blood on the floor, the washers, the dryers, and even the closet. David noticed the blood from the closet seemed to be pooling though, so he opened the closet door to find Trisha hidden inside. Trisha had been stabbed upwards of 20 times in the chest, neck, and stomach. Freaking out, David drags her from the closet and lays her on the floor. He runs to his apartment to call Trisha's mom, who called 911. Now, this is a weird detail to me. I know 1986 was a very different time and all, but if you just found your girlfriend practically mutilated, wouldn't you call police, like, immediately? As luck would have it, a police officer was in the area at the time. He got to the apartment at around 7 p.m., and upon arriving at the scene, the police officer noted that David waved him down and had blood covering his hands. David took the officer to the scene, and upon further investigation, it seemed Trisha had been stabbed roughly 24 times. Serious overkill, which is another odd detail to keep in the back of your mind. Her throat had been slit several times. Again, serious overkill and extremely violent for seemingly no reason. She was determined to not have been sexually assaulted, but from the way her clothes looked, officials think this may have been the original motive. Maybe Trisha fought back and made it harder than the attacker thought, and he panicked. Another detail to make note of is that the investigators thought Trisha may have tried to hide behind the washers to get away from her attacker. There are little to no details about her attack, and even fewer about much else to do with this case online. Luckily, after a long night of digging, I found more information about the timeline of the crime. So let's piece this together. The particular washing machines in question run on a 25-minute cycle. David left at 6:15 p.m., which means the clothes had been running for about 10 minutes already. When David returned at 6:45 p.m., the clothes were already in the dryer at that point. This means Trisha would have had to still be alive after the washing was done, which leaves an incredibly narrow time frame for a brutal crime like this to take place. Now, I know what you're all probably thinking. Swamp, are you saying the boyfriend did it? No, not really. But at the same time, the timeline really doesn't look good in his favor. At least at this point, that is. There are a few suspects, however. David Fain was one of them at the start. Investigators searched their apartment that night and found nothing that would really suggest David had done anything, much less a murder. Officials looked into David's phone records and could see that he had made a 25-minute phone call to his grandmother at about 6:17 p.m. This ultimately cleared him as a suspect in the minds of investigators. Not far from the apartments there is a golf course. Golfers at this course who were playing a game at the time claimed they had heard some screams but assumed nothing of it. They said they heard these screams sometime around 6:30 p.m., which would be 15 minutes after David had left the laundry room. The scream was rather long apparently. The golfers claimed it lasted roughly around 10 seconds or longer. Officials would go on to say they had two other people of interest that they were looking into. These two men lived in the same apartment building as Trisha. The only thing I could really find tying the men to this crime potentially was that they both had been in the laundry room that day and DNA from one of the men was found in the room. They both claimed they had nothing to do with what happened to Trisha, and since both of them lived in the building, it would be very easy to explain any physical evidence left behind by them. In 1986 though, officials used search warrants to gain access to one of the men's apartments. This man's name was William Radiker. His apartment was directly across the street from Trisha's. In this search, officials took 2 knives, a pair of shoes, and a rubber glove. William initially said he would take a lie detector test, but when it came time to do the said test, William refused and directed officials to his attorney. That definitely seems like something an innocent man would do, don't you think? The case would sadly go cold for a number of years after this. This is the exact reason I wanted to cover this case though. There is no reasonable excuse that this crime could not be solved. I understand back in the 80s, media and DNA were not very strong in these investigations yet. But with how weird William Radiker was acting, I would have done a bit more digging into him and his background. There are some updates on this case though. In 2012, upwards of 100 pieces of evidence were sent in for DNA testing. Sadly though, nothing seems to have come from this. Not to say nothing was found, but from what I can find, nothing of significance had been found. Trisha's family has been dedicated to finding the culprit and bringing justice for Trisha. Sadly, only a few months after Trisha died, her mother would also pass away of a heart attack in her brother's arms. Her father also passed away since then. This makes me very sad to know they never got closure. Trisha's brother, Brandon, has spent years investigating his sister's case. He held yearly vigils for her as well as offered a cash reward for any information that would help solve his sister's murder. Unfortunately, like his parents, Brandon would pass away from a heart attack in 2012 before getting closure of any answers for his sister. Ultimately, the police are 100% sure someone had to have seen something or heard something in that building that day. They are in hopes that the longer time passes, the braver someone will get and come forward with information. Sadly though, I personally feel the longer that time goes on, the less of a chance we have to bring justice to Trisha Meredith.
Brandon says he's trying to get the money together to put together some billboards on the west side of town to highlight not only his sister's case, but other cases of unsolved murders from the 1980s.
Who knows how long this is going to take? Oh, I know he's out there, and I hope he's listening. I refuse to stop.
Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button as it helps me out a ton. The more likes this video gets, the more YouTube promotes it to fresh new eyes, and we can use all the help we can to get the word out on this case. If you're new to the swamp, why not join us and hit that subscribe button? Turn on notifications to never miss a new upload. I upload new videos almost every single day, and all things natural and supernatural. What are your thoughts on this case? Personally, there seem to be red flags all over the place, but I can't really decide who I think did it. I'd love to know your theories in the comment section below. I'd love to know more about William Radiker as well. If you're not aware, you can download Swamp Dweller Scary Stories on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, and every other podcasting platform out there. Thank you guys as always for supporting the channel the way you do. I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video.
This is the last good picture Brandon Meredith has with his sister before she was murdered.
It's been devastating. It's ripped my whole family apart.
In this laundry room at her first apartment, 19-year-old Trisha Meredith was murdered April 7th, 1986. This all happened behind big windows 25 years ago in front of a parking lot full of people on a spring day.
Take a moment to consider what fell from the sky in the winter of 1876.
Witnesses describe a shower of meat, a phenomenon that, as Adam Weiner reports, remains unexplained.
Living in the country is a very interesting way of life. Personally, I grew up in the country and spent most of my time exploring the rural areas where I lived. How many of you have lived on farms, though? How many of you raised cows and other livestock? I myself lived on a beef farm as a teenager for some time. My guest today, that chapter, aka Mike, is no stranger to the strange and unexplained. He often covers unsolved mysteries and cold cases. Today I enlisted his help to explain this, well, rather strange phenomena. Meat is essential for many people's lives. But what would you do if one day it suddenly started raining chunks of meat? This may sound like a silly question, but this apparently actually happened in Rankin, Kentucky in 1876. This is the odd story of the Kentucky meat shower. It was a Sunday afternoon, 144 years ago in Rankin, Kentucky, and a woman, simply known as Mrs. Crouch, was making soap on her porch at around 11 or 12. While doing this, she seemed to notice what looked like pieces of meat falling from the sky. Mrs. Crouch claimed she was no more than 40 to 50 feet from her front step when she felt a slight breeze and suddenly, meat started to hit the ground all around her. She mentioned it was still bright and sunny while this went down. There were no warning signs that anything would be out of the norm. She described the meat as grisly looking. She said the meat made a snapping-like noise when it hit the ground, and she saw pieces as big as her hand fall at points. She went and got her husband to show him this immaculate event. Mr. and Mrs. Crouch adamantly believed this event was a sign from God as they watched this unfold for several minutes. Apparently, not everyone was fazed though, as the Crouch's cat seemed to enjoy the shower of meat. When this event, now known as the Kentucky meat shower, concluded, pieces of meat were found all over the ground and hanging from fences, covering an area of roughly 100 yards or so. Now, I realize how wild and unbelievable this story sounds, but apparently, it actually happened. And there are even reports of the same thing happening in Europe at a later date. Maybe I'll make a video on that as a follow-up to this case. This event was reported by Scientific American magazine, the New York Times, and many other publications around the country. This story may be really short and uneventful, but it doesn't end there. There is actually a fairly healthy amount of information and even scientific study into this event. There are pieces of meat that have actually been preserved and still exist to this day, 144 years later. The pieces of meat were mostly in 2-inch by 2-inch pieces, and at least one piece was reported to be in a 4-inch by 4-inch piece. Safe to say, these are some pretty finely chopped pieces of meat, which truly makes this even weirder. Now, the meat looked like it was beef, but after reading the report in the Scientific American, 2 men who witnessed and tasted the meat speculated that it tasted more like lamb or deer. A local hunter by the name of B.F. Ellington was positive it was actually bear meat. A local butcher claimed it was more like mutton than anything else. It seems no one can agree as to what this meat was. For this next part, I'm going to go over a few theories, but helping me go over these theories is going to be my good friend Mike. Take it away, my friend.
Charles Fort, a noted writer and researcher who specialized in strange phenomena, noted in his book, The Book of the Damned, that there had been no rain that day, which would debunk another theory thrown out there by Leopold Brandeis, that this was not meat that fell from the sky, but actually a substance known as nostoc, which is a type of cyanobacteria that becomes thick and gelatinous when wet. Yummy! But if there was no rain, then that would make this theory a bit hard to prove. Professor J.L. Smith thought the meat could actually be dried frog spawn that had been picked up from a pond by the wind. Now, this theory was eventually scrapped by Smith himself. But yeah, that was apparently another theory that was thrown around at the time. There were even more wild theories being thrown around by the press, though. William Alden, a writer for the New York Times, had 2 separate ideas. One being obvious and the other being a bit more dubious. Alden speculates there is an ever-growing suspicion that the shower actually rained finely ground human meat caused by deranged killers or something like that. Another interesting but not very plausible theory is that 2 local men were fighting and got picked up by a tornado and threw their meat and just their bits and bobs just everywhere. This is, of course, just absolutely ridiculous. But to be fair, that's not as insane as the cow mutilation theory that entails aliens beaming pieces of the meat just all over the countryside. There are more scientific minds looking into this though, which might add a bit more insight.
Samples of this mystery meat were sent to the Newark Scientific Association for analysis. Finally, we may get some consensus on this odd phenomenon. Dr. Alan McLean, Hamilton, wrote to the Medical Record Weekly Journal to state he had identified the meat as lung tissue from a horse or a human infant. Well, this just makes things go from lighthearted fun to creepy real fast. This claim was seemingly backed up though. 2 samples of the meat were also identified as being lung tissue. 3 other pieces were identified as muscle, and 2 other samples were cartilage. The question still remains, where did this meat come from? Well, this final theory might just have the answer to that. This one is the least interesting theory thrown out there thus far, but is honestly likely the most probable. This one was even suggested by the Crouches themselves, alongside chemist Robert Peter. This theory speculates that the meat shower was caused by vomit produced by a passing flock of vultures. Now, I know this sounds ungodly, but hear me out. Vultures gorging themselves with too much food and then throwing it back up is not that uncommon. It has actually been reported in similar circumstances like this before. The chances that this flock of vultures vomiting over the Crouch's house are 1 in a million, but this could have been the 1 in that million. After further investigation, I did find that normally, If one vulture vomits, the rest will tend to vomit as well. This was an interesting fact, which solidifies this theory a bit more. But, usually, they would vomit on the ground to help them fly and not while in flight. This theory would explain the various parts of meat that fell as well. Ultimately, the Kentucky meat shower remains an unsolved mystery. Even after 144 years of head-scratching, no one can seem to figure out what caused this meat rain, or what type of meat it even was. With no lack of theories being thrown around out there though, we may yet still figure this one out. I only wish we could go back in time and pull out a camera to capture this event. I would love to be able to see what a meat shower is like. I know many of you are thinking, Swamp, it's been like 1 billion years since this happened. There is no way we can look further into this. Well, you would be wrong. You can in fact get up close and personal with some samples of the mysterious meat that fell from the sky. The Monroe Musnick Medical and Science Museum at Transylvania University in Lexington, Kentucky, has one of the only preserved pieces of meat left. A random fact, there is apparently a meat-flavored jelly bean based on the flavor of the Kentucky meat rain. Sounds like I need to get my butt to Kentucky and get some meat rain flavored candy. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed this case, please hit that like button as it helps me out a ton. If you're new to the channel, why not subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss a new video. I upload them almost every single day on all things natural and supernatural. If you have a case that you would like me to check out in a future video, be sure to comment them down below or submit them at swampdweller.net. A big thanks to my friend Mike from that chapter for helping me share this story with you all today. If you enjoyed his part, please be sure to check out his channel and subscribe. He uploads multiple videos a month on all things strange and disturbing. If you're not aware, you can download your favorite Swamp Dweller scary stories on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, and wherever else you guys listen to podcasts. Thanks as always for supporting the Swamp. I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video.
I'm standing just about in the field where locals say the event happened. In fact, it was probably a day similar to today. It was winter and it was mostly clear skies that day, except instead of snow showers, witnesses say it was a shower of flesh. People at the time described the pieces as, quote, perfectly fresh and tasting, yes, tasting like mutton or venison. Sound pretty ridiculous? Well, here's the thing. There's proof.
A man named Alexander Tenney Parker who collected several samples and brought them back to Transylvania to be studied.
Inside the Musnick Museum at Transylvania University in Lexington are pieces of flesh, supposedly from that fabled day back in 1876.
Since 1969, an estimated 40-plus women have gone missing or have been found brutally murdered along the long stretch of road known as Highway 16 and its surrounding forest. Royal Canadian Mounted Police are knee-deep in unsolved murders and disappearances from Highway 16 in British Columbia. Today, I am covering the truly awful and spine-chilling story of the Highway of Tears. As always, if you have a case you'd like to see me cover in a future video, be sure to send it in to the website or the email you can find in the description down below. Highway 16 boasts around 720 kilometers of desolate road winding through the deep, untouched Canadian forest. More than half the missing women from these cases come from Aboriginal First Nation communities. Over 600 Aboriginal women have either been reported missing or been victims of unsolved homicides. It's no wonder the locals collectively call this road the Highway of Tears. I can almost promise you that you have never heard of a case more buried in death than this one. As the legend goes, the story of the Highway of Tears starts all the way back to 150 years ago. With the poor treatment of the indigenous population by the authorities, which they were allegedly forcing somewhere around 80,000 children to be removed from their families to attempt to blend them into normal, mainstream Canadian culture. rumors of abuse and starvation ran rampant through the local communities. The separated children were not even allowed to contact their families at all, and were not permitted to practice their cultural or religious beliefs. After many cruel years, the Canadian government issued an apology in 2008, definitely a hard blow to their public image. What makes this interesting, though, is that the residential homes located on the Highway of Tears are all kind of linked. Canadian officials were the ones originally responsible for separating the kids from their families, leaving a poor trust between them and the officials. Many people from communities in British Columbia were poor at the time, and didn't have vehicles and relied on hitchhiking, as public services like hospitals are located very far away from their residential area. These areas are usually riddled with drug and alcohol problems, which traditionally mainstream news will report negatively on. Before I go any further, I'd like to hand the mic off to my good friend Unit 522, who helped me with this part of the video.
Despite the number of disappearances on the highway over the years, nothing was really looked into seriously until Nicole Howard, age 25, went missing on June 21st of 2002. The cases were almost immediately picked up by the mainstream media. Some speculate, since Howard wasn't a native, that officials took preference to her case. Before this, Indigenous Aboriginal women have gone missing for years, but there was little to no publicity, as the media in many cases seemed to falsely label them as prostitutes or drug users, and showed little respect to their cases. This, of course, can always boil down to speculation and political banter, but history has shown governments to be biased in the past. Sometime in the fall of 2005, officials from British Columbia started a project known as Project E-Pana. The purpose of this project was to investigate the unsolved cases of 9 missing or murdered women along the Highway 16 route. After 2 years of work on the initial 9 cases, Canadian officials added another 9, expanding it to a total of 18 active cold cases from the Highway of Tears. Among these 18 cases, 13 of them were unsolved murders, and the other 5 were missing persons. These incidents initially dated back to 1969. Officials estimated somewhere around 600 or so women have been murdered on the Highway of Tears. How is it possible for upwards of 600 people to have been killed with no one at all taking notice? We know that the officials weren't exactly looking out for the natives' best interests, but this just seems over the top.
After many painstaking hours, the project managed to link DNA to Portland drifter Bobby Fowler with the 1974 murder of 16-year-old hitchhiker Colin McMillan, which luckily helped us move forward with one of the seemingly endless cases on this dreadful highway. There is a strong theme of serial killers being connected to this highway as well, though. A great example of this would be the pig farmer from hell himself, Robert Willie Pickton. Robert Pickton was born October 24, 1949 in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. Pickton, despite his creepy looks, was surprisingly a multi-million-dollar pig farmer with around 27 kilometers of property in Vancouver. Who would have ever expected this farm boy to turn into one of Canada's most infamous serial killers? On February 6, 2002, police executed a search warrant for illegal firearms at Pickton's property. Police also got a second court order to search the entire farm in hopes to find more clues in the British Columbia missing woman investigation. As luck would have it, a prescription asthma inhaler and other items belonging to one of the missing women were found at the farm, officially linking Pickton to at least one murder from the Highway of Tears. Convicted in 2007 of the second-degree murders of 6 women, Pickton was eventually charged with the deaths of 20 more women, a large majority of them being from downtown Vancouver and Aboriginal. In December 2007, he was sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole. Officials have no actual idea how many serial killers and/or kidnapping rings are a part of this phenomenon. With over 600 cases still wide open with no answers, it seems we may never truly fully solve the tragic and violent mystery of the Highway of Tears. Bobby Fowler and Robert Picton are just two of the sick and depraved souls who stalk the Highway 16 roads looking for a vulnerable hitchhiker to make their next victim, though. It is hard to connect other cases with the convicted killers from the area to this project, as the abundance of cases is just so great. The government has attempted to combat this network of killers, though. A bus system using Greyhound buses has been established on Highway 16. Current sources do mention this system may be in jeopardy due to the budget cost and cuts, though. More health and social services have been added closer to the residents of the area as well. The Project E-Pana investigation continues to carry on until this very day. Canadian police believe that several serial killers have stalked Route 16 for over 30 to 40 years now. Canada is stereotypically known as a place full of kind, polite people. British Columbia seems to break that mold and go in a much more sinister direction. Whatever's in the water in British Columbia is seemingly making killers pop up like mosquitoes. For the safety of you and others, please be careful while driving down Highway 16, and please, for the love of God, don't hitchhike on the Highway of Tears and become another lost soul to the open road. History seemingly repeats itself, time and time again. Too much power can lead someone to their own self-destruction. In today's video, I'm covering a case from a small town in the middle of nowhere, Missouri, by the name of Skidmore. There are less than 300 people here, and I think that this tale is definitely a creepy one. We're going to get into the tale of the town that got away with murder, but this mystery is still unsolved. If you have an unsolved mystery or a story that you'd like to send into the show, be sure to do so by using the email or the website in the description down below. I would love to share and check out any information you have. Let's get into this video. On the outside, Skidmore, Missouri looks like a quaint, quiet town. With under 300 residents, farming is the main pastime here. The folks seem nice enough and the small community vibe is apparent. But there seems to be something darker lurking in this community. Behind the small town vibes, Skidmore is plagued by violent crimes in its past. Ken Rex McElroy was a big man, standing tall with a 270-pound frame. He was born on June 1st, 1934. His family was poor and worked as farmers, as seemingly most others did at the time. McElroy would only get to the 8th grade before he dropped out and began working. When he was around the age of 18, he suffered a brutal injury which left him in chronic pain all over his body. However, McElroy was no saint and had begun to commit awful crimes. Some have speculated the injuries he sustained to the head from the work accident could have led to his behavior. Locals described McElroy as having a sort of inferiority complex, seemingly wanting to be the big bad dude around the town. Ultimately, I say he achieved that goal. Not only was he a large man, but he was also fairly wealthy with his farming and land leasing business. He also was involved in multiple thefts that included livestock, gasoline, valuables, and more. Safe to say, McElroy was no stranger of the law. A lawyer even went on record to state that he would be on trial at least 3 times a year, which is absolutely mind-blowing. McElroy would try to use the rumor that his lawyer also represented the mob as a fear tactic around town. Out of the 21 indictments he received, he was only convicted once. He would intimidate witnesses to stay quiet. He would park outside their homes and watch them until they submitted to his wishes. McElroy's list of charges is a long and disgusting one. Among the charges are destroying property, robbery, sexual assault, violent threats, and at least shooting 2 people with a gun. Among other things, He was known to indulge in pedophilic tendencies and adultery and polygamy. McElroy had publicly dated and impregnated a 14-year-old girl named Trina McLeod. After their child was born, Trina attempted to leave him and return home to her parents, but McElroy would not allow that to happen. His response was to burn down her parents' home and even kill their dog by shooting it. This man is the definition of pure evil. There is no doubt in my mind, after only getting a little less than halfway into this, that this man is nothing but bad news. At the end of the day, the small town of Skidmore was an utter terror. It seemed as if the police just could not do anything about it. But, as history shows, and repeats itself, all tyrants come to a fall. It was April 25th, 1980. McElroy went to a local grocery store with his daughter. Ernest Bowenkamp, the store owner, had accused McElroy's daughter of stealing. McElroy, with his typical temper, thought it was best to handle the situation by stalking the family of Bowenkamp. Fast forward to July 8th, 1980. McElroy drives his vehicle to the back of the Bowenkamp store. He burst in, threatening Ernest, and shot him in the neck with a shotgun at close range. Somehow, Bowenkamp survived, and McElroy was charged with attempted murder. As usual, he tried to intimidate the Bowenkamps by sitting in his car and stalking them, sometimes even shooting his gun around the house. As the case progressed, things got odd though. The residing prosecutor resigned, and rumors flew around that McElroy bullied him out of the picture. A younger prosecutor replaced the previous, David Baird. Freshly out of law school, this young man did what no one else seemingly had been able to do before. He convicted McElroy of the crime. Even with this conviction though, his charge was lessened from attempted murder to knowingly causing harm to another. But a victory nonetheless, right? Well, not really. The conviction was only for 2 years, and McElroy got out on bond anyway. A fruitless victory at best. After the trial, McElroy was seen at the local bar with a rifle. He was allegedly making threats of finishing the job on Bowenkamp. Police detained him for this, but released him shortly after. The next day, there was allegedly a meeting by the local bar, with over 60 residents of the town. Rumor has it, the local sheriff and mayor were among those numbers. The purpose was to discuss how to prevent McElroy from harming anyone else in the community. Skidmore felt hopeless and felt the system had failed them. So July 10th, 1980, Skidmore took things into their own hands. McElroy and Trina were at the local bar having drinks. Over 60 people made their way to the bar and completely surrounded McElroy on all sides. When they got into their vehicle, Trina claimed to look over and see someone pulling a rifle and pointing it at McElroy's head. Shots rang out and littered the vehicle. Trina jumped out and was carried away to safety by another local. Casings from 2 different guns were found on the scene. He was shot from behind, so he would never have seen his killers. Not a single person called 911 for the shot man. What's interesting is that there were 2 different guns that fired, but only one person was ever even singled out. The entire town of Skidmore, despite almost half the population being at the scene of the crime, apparently saw nothing. The only witness was Trina, who claimed it was a local man by the name of Dale Clement, who was apparently a co-owner of the bar. He denied the allegations, and nothing was ever pursued further. The end of the story seemingly has no end. Even with the town truly knowing the truth, this remains an unsolved mystery in the history books. With fewer and fewer residents still alive from that time period, we may never get the true story, but hopefully one day we can actually get an ending to this unsolved mystery. There are many, many days where I spend my time scripting, researching, and writing on unsolved cold cases from all around the world. Sometimes they just don't end up being long enough to make one single documentary out of. So today, I'm going to be sharing 3 of the unsolved mysteries I've done some research on in the past, but didn't end up uploading because it was simply too short. These 3 cases, though, are all just as equally tragic, and they are all unsolved. Helping me with one of these cases today is my good friend Black Eye Blonde. If you appreciate her research, her storytelling, and you like her voice, please be sure to check out her channel and subscribe. You can find the link to do so in the top of the description. Now, let's get into these unsolved and tragic cold cases. It was December 9th, 2018, and the city of Fort Wayne, Indiana, was cold, but the nightlife was still very much alive. Among the many patrons at the Brass Rail Bar was 25-year-old Kevin Nguyen. Kevin was allegedly kicked out of the bar that night and would never be seen again. What happened to Kevin once he left the Brass Rail Bar? Well, this is a look at the events leading up to Kevin's mysterious disappearance, in an attempt to piece together the real story of what happened. On the night of December 9th, 2018, Kevin had visited the Brass Rail Bar 4 times throughout the night. He was eventually kicked out after an altercation, according to the Brass Rail's management. Kevin's family would state they knew from his credit card statements that he paid his bill, bought something to eat from a food truck, and called home asking for a ride. Kevin called his sister sometime around 2:44 a.m., asking to be picked up from the bar. Kevin's mom would be the one to come get him, but, as we know at this point, Kevin would vanish before she could get to him. Kevin would be reported as missing, and authorities began their search. Around a block or so northeast of where Kevin was last contacted, a fast food restaurant named Arby's gave police 2 surveillance videos showing Kevin traveling on foot alone at around 1:40 a.m., which would be around an hour before he called his sister. The second video shows Kevin once again walking by the Arby's at 2:45 a.m., which was roughly a minute after he had called his sister. Even with an idea of what direction Kevin was going and what time, nothing more really came from this. That is until December 20th, 2018, when Kevin's glasses were discovered in the parking lot of the Brass Rail Bar by his family. This is of course very concerning. Kevin was last seen wearing tan skinny jeans, a dark blue jacket, black Vans shoes, and Burberry brand prescription glasses. Other details about Kevin are that he had small gauges that were black in color at the time. Kevin had slight facial hair at the time as well. His hair was fairly short. Kevin has brown eyes and weighed around 160 pounds at the time, give or take. This is where the details seemingly stop in this story. I dug around a bit online and stumbled upon a fairly recent post on Reddit's Unresolved Mysteries blog. A user who claims to be a local from the area posted this interesting piece of information. Now, before I go any further, please note that this should be considered a theory and is in no way proven to be linked to Kevin's case. This local says after talking around with other locals in the area, he was able to come up with this information. Roughly about a year or so before Kevin's disappearance, another man that had been kicked out of the Brass Rail was found dead from blunt force trauma, and it was ruled a homicide. That case has also remained unsolved until this very day. This man was found on the street about a mile north of the Brass Rail at around midnight on September 21st, 2017. What makes this so interesting though, is the fact that one of the bouncers of the bar is supposedly the local mayor's nephew, which has led to much speculation and has birthed many rumors. Where did Kevin Nguyen go? Did he simply walk away in a drunken stupor and get lost somewhere? Was he abducted and taken somewhere? Was he a victim of this alleged bouncer who has apparently killed before? Maybe we will never know. But what I can say is, this is yet another tragedy that should have never happened.
I apologize for any mispronunciation of names during this video. Viewer discretion is advised. It was the winter of 2010 on Long Island, New York. A canine police officer and his cadaver dog were out on a training mission when they came across a morbid discovery. They had stumbled upon the nude, decomposed remains of a woman wrapped in a burlap sack. This discovery would open the door to one of the most notorious serial killer cases Long Island has ever seen. The hunt for the Gilgo Beach killer actually began in May of 2010 when escort Shannon Gilbert of New Jersey was reported missing. Sources said that she was last seen in the Gilgo Beach area fleeing from a car. Shortly before her disappearance, Gilbert reportedly made a 911 call stating that they were going to kill her. Hopeful that the found corpse may be connected to Gilbert's disappearance, the police began to comb the beach for evidence. However, they got more than they bargained for when 4 more bodies were discovered, also nude and wrapped in burlap sacks, like the first victim. Unfortunately, none of the bodies belonged to Shannon Gilbert. Instead, they belonged to Maureen Brainard Barnes, Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Lynn Costello. The body of Shannon Gilbert would later be found on December 13th behind some of the residential houses that lined the beach, in a marsh only half a mile from where she was last seen. A week after the discovery of Gilbert's body, some of her clothes were also recovered. However, the carnage didn't stop there. The police went on to find 6 more victims as they expanded their search. Jessica Taylor, Jane Doe number 6, John Doe, Jane Doe number 7, Jane Doe number 3, or Peaches, and, unfortunately, Baby Doe. Jessica Taylor was the only one of those 6 victims to be identified. Taylor had been missing since 2003, and her body was not intact upon discovery. Her head and hands were found on the beach, while her torso was later discovered in the town of Manorville. A similar fate befell Jane Doe number 6, whose head, hands, and right foot were found on the beach, while her torso was also discovered in Manorville. John Doe was the only one of the killer's male victims. He was an Asian male dressed in female clothing, and it is believed he was a prostitute. Jane Doe number 7's body was divided between 2 beaches, Tobay Beach and Fire Island. Now, Jane Doe number 3, better known as Peaches, because of the tattoo discovered on her dismembered torso, was actually discovered back in 1997. Only her torso was recovered from a green plastic storage container located in Hempstead Lake Park, not very far from Gilgo Beach. When the police started investigating the beaches as part of the 2010 case, they came across the remaining parts of Peaches in a plastic bag near Jones Beach State Park. Lastly, in the year 2011, the especially unfortunate remains of Baby Doe were discovered. Baby Doe was also found in Manorville, just like the torsos of Jessica Taylor and Jane Doe number 6. She was believed to be between 18 and 24 months, and upon DNA testing, it was discovered that she was in fact Peach's daughter. The experts believe scattering the 2 bodies was an attempt to throw off the authorities. More disturbing information also came to light relating to one of the first 4 discovered bodies, Melissa Bartholomew. In 2009, when Bartholomew originally disappeared, her younger sister received text messages and phone calls from her missing sister's phone. The caller used derogatory terms such as whore when addressing Bartholomew's younger sister, and the man on the other end also asked to speak directly to her. Sadly, the man never stayed on the line long enough for any of the calls to be traced. These disturbing calls stopped almost as quickly as they came once the media picked up the story. It soon became obvious to police that these murders were the work of a serial killer because of the specific patterns the killer practiced. For example, most of the victims of the Gilgo Beach killer were Caucasian women associated with prostitution and the sex trade, with their main cause of death being strangulation. The only exceptions to this being the Asian male victim and Baby Doe. Although the Asian man was believed to be a prostitute, it was discovered that his death was caused by blunt force trauma. The cause of Baby Doe's death was never determined. Her and her mother Peaches were the killer's only two biracial victims. Furthermore, the Gilgo Beach killer dismembered almost all of his victims and placed them in burlap sacks. Additionally, the first 4 bodies discovered presented the most clear pattern. They were all found nude, dismembered, and wrapped in burlap sacks with their left shoes missing. It appeared that the killer deliberately placed the bodies to look as if they had been thrown from the road onto the beach. Each of the victims were found parallel to each other in a thick brush along the beach road. Lastly, each of these women had profiles on Craigslist advertising their services, thus earning the killer his other nickname, the Craigslist Ripper. It is widely believed that the Gilgo Beach killer is a Caucasian male in his mid-20s to mid-40s who is obviously very familiar with the South Shore and the beaches of Long Island. Further speculation states that he has detailed knowledge of law enforcement or even ties to law enforcement which have helped him avoid detection for so many years. His use of modern technology, such as Craigslist, to execute his murders means he must have advanced knowledge of how computers and cell phones work. He has never been traced by an IP address and wasn't caught while making phone calls to victim Melissa Bartholomew's family. There has been much speculation to who the Gilgo Beach killer might be, but nothing official has ever been proven. One suspect, Joel Rifkin, is a serial killer who is believed to have murdered 17 prostitutes between Long Island and New York City. He may have possible ties to some of the older remains, but has denied any involvement with the Gilgo case. The next possible suspect was Neil Falls, a potential serial killer who has since passed away. He was suspected to have murdered 10 prostitutes throughout multiple states. Many of his possible victims were advertising themselves online. Falls passed away on July 18, 2015, when an escort named Heather shot him as he attempted to strangle her. Robert Durst, a real estate heir, was suspected to have ties to the Gilgo Beach killings by the FBI. The FBI assembled an informal task force in 2012 to investigate where Durst lived in the past 10 years, New York being one of the locations. Durst dismembered one victim in Texas and disposed of her body near the ocean. A Texas jury ultimately ruled that the killing was an act of self-defense, and the connection between Durst and the Gilgo Beach murders was dismissed. In 2016, former police chief James Burke, who is most well known for reportedly keeping the FBI in the dark about the Gilgo Beach murders, was accused by a sex worker who says he's linked to the killings. Burke is currently serving out a 46-month sentence in federal prison due to multiple charges. Burke pled guilty to beating a man who stole a bag containing sex toys and pornography out of his SUV. He also pled guilty to then conspiring with fellow officers to cover up his actions and was officially added to the list of potential Gilgo Beach suspects due to these accusations. Furthermore, an escort named Leanne claims that she was at a party with Burke at Oak Beach, where he choked her and forced her into rough oral sex. In addition, she claims that Burke had trouble reaching climax during their encounter, calling her a bad whore, before getting aggressive and throwing crumpled $100 bills at her. John Ray, the lawyer for the family of Shannon Gilbert, the missing woman that spiked the Gilgo investigation, stated,
"This is the first time there has been an actual connection made between former Chief of Police Burke, Oak Beach, and prostitution, and that's why it's significant."
Burke's lawyers stood firm that these accusations are completely outrageous. Burke remains in jail for his original accusations, and has since been accused of hiding oxycodone in his cell after it was found taped under a shelf in his personal locker, but nothing else relating to the Gilgo investigation has come up. Most recently, 51-year-old carpenter John Bittroff was speculated to be responsible for at least one of the 10 unsolved murders relating to the Gilgo case. Bittroff resided in Manorville, where the torso of Jessica Taylor and Jane Doe No. 6 were found. The bodies were discovered just 3 miles from his home. In July 2017, Bittroff was found guilty of beating to death Rita Tangiri and Colleen McNamee, both prostitutes, back in 1990. These killings remained unsolved until 2014, when Bittroff was arrested following a DNA sample submitted by his brother, Timothy Bittroff. The DNA was a partial match to the DNA found on the two deceased women, whose bodies were found only 35 miles from the Gilgo Beach crime scene. This was the first conviction made in New York State with only a partial DNA match. This past September 12, 2017, he received consecutive 25 years to life sentences and is now imprisoned at Downstate Correctional Facility. After the sentence, the case's prosecutor, Robert Biancavilla, revealed that Bittroff is a suspect in the Gilgo Beach case.
There are remains of the victims at Gilgo Beach that may be attributed to the handiwork of Mr. Bittroff, and that investigation is continuing,
Biancavilla stated to the press. Furthermore, Lynn Bartholomew, the mother of victim Melissa Bartholomew, whose younger sister received phone calls from the killer after Melissa's death, stated to People magazine, "I don't know what to think because Melissa has a lot of calls to Manorville, on Long Island, from her phone, and that is where this guy is from. I am thinking when he got arrested was when this all stopped again. I am just hoping it is him so it can all end." However, Bittroff's lawyer, Jonathan Manley, remains adamant that a connection between his client and the Gilgo murders was never mentioned during trial.
This was never mentioned before. This is a serious accusation with absolutely no factual basis. Mr. Bittroff maintains his innocence in the deaths of Mrs. Tangiri and Mrs. McNamee, and any insinuation that he had anything to do with the Gilgo killings is laughable and meant to simply attract headlines.
Even John Ray, the lawyer for Shannon Gilbert's family, stated that any connection between Bittroff's case and the Beach murders is a stretch. He based this statement off the fact that he has done a lot of research in his search for answers for the family and has found nothing tying Bittroff to the other crimes. The investigation into John Bittroff's possible connection to the Gilgo Beach murders is ongoing. There are still many unanswered questions and loose ends when it comes to the Gilgo Beach killer. The case remains one of Long Island's greatest unsolved mysteries. So, if you ever find yourself wandering on one of Long Island's many beaches, be aware of your surroundings. You never know what you may stumble upon because the Gilgo Beach killer could still be on the loose.
Who buried Gautam Josinghani alive? It's not often that I focus on Asian unsolved mysteries, simply for the fact that I don't speak or read their many diverse languages. I do often get suggested a lot of interesting, lesser-known mysteries from the region, and recently got sent a link to a news article about a murder case in New Delhi, India. This was no normal murder case, though. This case seemingly involved a love triangle, jealousy, and cover-up. The way the victim was killed, though, is what really intrigued me and caught my eye. Not to say murder is intriguing, but our story today covers death by being buried alive. This is the unsolved story of who buried Gautam Josinghani alive. Sometime in early March in 1980, 19-year-old Gautam Josinghani was making his way home from college. His friend, or cousin, it is a bit unclear, was with him on the walk. Gautam was in his sophomore year at St. Stephen's College, which is located in the major city area of New Delhi. His family was native to New Delhi, and he had grown up in the area. From reports and write-ups I have found online, many of his friends and family said he was liked by all of his peers and had a plethora of friends. Somewhere along the way, Gautam and his friend or cousin, still unclear at this point, split ways. Gautam stopped at a bus stop, and his companion went on walking his way. Nobody would ever think this would be one of Gautam's last interactions. No one knows how Gautam vanished from the bus stop. The last person who saw Gautam had left the bus stop and had no idea of what happened. The bus stop was reported to be pretty busy around the time Gautam would have been there, so many speculate someone had to have seen something. But what if he was lured away by someone he knew and not abducted? With so many people around at the time, it would be impossible for a struggle to go unnoticed. At first, it seemed as though no one cared about Gautam's disappearance. He had vanished without much of a trace from a busy bus stop. His parents didn't seem concerned at all at first. Well, that is, until the next day, on March 7th that is, when the family received a note claiming Gautam had been kidnapped and were demanding the family to pay a ransom. Obviously, freaked out, the family reported their son missing to the authorities. It seemed the police were not too keen on being bothered with this case though. They tried to say Gautam probably just ran away, and there was nothing to worry about. They claimed that the note was fake and continued to ignore the case and not investigate. 2 weeks later though, an anonymous caller would phone into the police, claiming they had information on what happened to Gautam. According to this caller, Gautam had been involved in some sort of love triangle with a mother and a daughter. Apparently this mother and daughter were staying in some sort of guest house in New Delhi. This caller went on to claim that this mother and daughter also had some sort of triangle with a smuggler who owned a hotel in Mumbai, formerly known as Bombay. The caller said Gautam was dead and had been murdered. This caller then dropped a bomb on police, giving them an alleged location of Gautam's body. To prove the caller was authentic and real, the caller said when they find the body, he would be wearing only one sock. The caller then hung up and has never been traced or heard from again. From what I could find, sources conflict a bit on what happened after this information came in. A few articles claim the police searched the area, and others say that a security guard happened to have found it on accident. What can be said for sure though, is that Gautam's body was found on March 28, 1980, roughly a mile or so away from the location given by the anonymous caller. Here's where this gets even more interesting though. Gautam's body was found with his feet sticking out of a shallow grave with a sock only on one foot. The details of his death are genuinely shocking. When the autopsy was conducted, there was mud found lodged in his throat, nose, and ears. It was ruled that Gautam was buried alive and died of suffocation. He had his arms tied behind his back, leaving him unable to escape or defend himself. He had a broken chest bone and many broken ribs, suggesting he had been beaten before thrown into his grave, still breathing. The sad fact that his feet were sticking out suggested he likely tried to dig himself out, but ultimately failed. The post-mortem report suggested he was likely dead up to 2 weeks before he was discovered. The same period the New Delhi police were telling the family he likely was just a runaway. Gautam's father would offer a 15,000 rupee reward. For those unaware, a rupee is the equivalent to $1 or £1 in India. The New Delhi police would claim to interview well over 200 people of interest within New Delhi and the surrounding states. Despite these efforts though, nothing of worth would ever seemingly come up. No leads or information would seem to be out there. Aside from the police stating they think jealousy could have been a motive for the killing. But at this point, it looks like no suspects have been named publicly. Of course, when a high-profile case is handled with such negligence, the police would face wide criticism. Many student organizations and even members of the Indian Parliament sent heavy criticism toward the New Delhi police for not taking immediate action when presented with Gautam's disappearance. They were also being targeted for not following up on leads related to the murder as well. This case was used as a prime example showing a pattern of Delhi murder cases remaining unsolved due to this negligence. Many think the police were paid to ignore these murders though, and others think the police simply just don't care. 2 years before Gautam's murder, he had two relatives named Geeta and Sanjay Chopra, who were 16 and 14 years old and were kidnapped and held for ransom. They were killed when the kidnappers, Kuljit Singh and Jasbir Singh, got scared when they learned the children's father was a respected, high-ranking captain in the Navy. That case, however, would be solved within the year and the kidnappers were sentenced and hung. Even though these cases aren't entirely considered to be related, it does raise a few questions on a potential motive. And at the end of the day, this case remains unsolved and has had no new leads in decades. Who killed Gautam Josinghani? Why did they kill him? Was he really involved in some sort of love triangle? It seems with so little information to base our theories on, we may never truly know the facts. Unless someone comes forward, that is, and with it being around 40 years later, that may never really happen. While searching for possible explanations, I did run across a Reddit post that speculated it could have been another ransom kidnapping gone wrong, just like the case of the Chopra children. But personally, I am leaning more toward the potential case of jealousy though, simply because the only other information we have outside of details of Gautam's death is that he was allegedly a part of some love triangle. But I must admit, being the son of a high-ranking Navy captain probably meant he would be a part of a wealthier family for the area potentially. Who called the police with the information? Will this case ever be solved? These are all questions that will maybe never be answered, and maybe we will never know.
The defendant is 29-year-old Wade Wilson. He faces multiple charges, including 2 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz. These 2 women were killed within days of each other back in October of 2019. Melton was found dead in her home, and Ruiz was found in a field several days later. Wilson faces the death penalty there in Florida in connection to these killings.
Is it possible for someone to be a natural-born killer, or is it a learned trait through trauma? It seems like every case is different depending on the details, of course. Today's case is one that genuinely floored me from the start. Being a Florida native, seeing heinous crimes like this in my area really moves my heart. I wanted to cover this case because the media coverage was outrageously insane. I have watched several hours of jail phone calls, court proceedings, and podcasts about this case. With all that information soaked into my brain, here is the disturbing and downright disgusting story of Wade Wilson. On October 7th, 2019, Wade Wilson killed 2 women, Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz, in Cape Coral, Florida. Wade met Christine for the first time at Buddha, a popular local bar, on October 6th, 2019. They would end up partying together, and the next day while she was asleep, he strangled her to death and stole her car. Later that morning, he encountered Diane Ruiz while she was walking to work. He asked her for directions and coaxed her into the car. Once in his car, Wade strangled Diane. When he saw that she had not died, he pushed her out of the passenger seat and he ran her over multiple times with the vehicle. Later that same morning, he also viciously attacked his now ex-girlfriend, Mila Montanez, and tried to drag her into the car. She managed to escape, and somebody called the police. Roughly around 9 a.m. on Monday, Fort Myers police responded to the 2000 block of West 1st Street for a report of a male and a female fighting, according to a probable cause statement. Somebody made multiple 911 calls and callers stated that the male was dragging the female outside of a business. Police said a 36-year-old Fort Myers woman, Mila Montanez, was involved in the altercation and told them that Wade tried to pull her into his vehicle and that as she was about to get away, he got out and started to drag her towards his car. She said he also punched her in the face and bit her ear. But she said she was able to escape to a neighboring business. Police say that the woman had multiple injuries, which included road rash on her elbows and arms, scraped knees, a busted bottom and top lip, and a cut elbow. She also told police that Wilson threatened to kill her and that she was in fear for her safety. At around 10 a.m. on Monday, Diane Ruiz was last seen walking to work at the Cape Coral Moose Lodge. When she didn't arrive by her scheduled time, her co-workers called the police, worried about their friend and co-worker. Police immediately issued a missing person alert.
It was a normal business day. I was just dealing with clients that morning.
Did there come an occasion when you came into contact with Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Would you please describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how that came about?
Wade came in a black car. He backed up to one of the buildings. on the property there, and he came up to my truck, my vehicle, when I was on the property, and I was with a client at that time, so I told him to give me a moment, and I'll be right with him. And once I went into the building, he was there trying to get a plane ticket or a bus ticket or whatever he could from me to leave town.
Now, when you saw Mr. Wilson, could you please describe for us what he was wearing at that time?
He was wearing sweatpants only, no shoes, no shirt. He was bloody, and he was missing a couple of teeth.
At around 8 p.m. on Monday, the Cape Coral Police Department contacted a witness named Josh Luckage. He reported that Wilson had arrived in a black vehicle and confessed to stabbing someone. The police established a perimeter and searched for Wilson but could not locate him. Later, they discovered he was hiding at a residence in the 2000 block of Northeast First Terrace. When the police spoke with the homeowners who were out of town, they confirmed that no one had permission to be in the house. The police then called the landline inside the home and spoke with Wilson. According to the affidavit, he mentioned that he needed to talk to his father and then he would come out of the house. On that same day, Cape Coral police investigated a suspicious death in the 4800 block of Tudor Drive, Cape Coral. The deceased was identified as Christine Ann Melton, aged 35. The police continued searching for Diane and even brought in dogs on Wednesday to search the area around the German-American Social Club off Pine Island Road around 1:30 p.m. on Thursday. While searching for Diane, Cape Coral police found a body near her home, and on a Friday, they confirmed that it was indeed her.
I answered the phone, and he said, hey, Dad, I need some help. Well, I automatically thought, he needs a hotel. He needs money for whatever. So it was a hot day. I was frustrated. I said, listen, call me around dinner time. I'll be done working. Just call me then. We'll figure it out. So he calls me. He's in a panic. I could tell he's high. I need help. I've done something I can't take back. There's two people that aren't with us anymore. And my first thought was, oh God, here we go. I just thought he was on one. We talked for a few minutes. I said, listen, I'm on my way home. I said, call me back tonight and we'll figure it out. I said, are you safe where you are? And he said, yeah, I'm good. I'm in the house. I'm good. I said, all right. So in the meantime,
and he's already told you about taking two people out.
Yeah, but it was general. That's all he said, and he didn't say, he just said, I've done something I can't take back.
When Wade Wilson's father, Stephen Testaseca, spoke with his son, Wilson immediately confessed that he was a killer. And because Wilson is known to exaggerate and has a history of drug abuse, Stephen, who was at work at the time of the call, told Wilson to call him back later in the evening when he had more time to process this. At least 2 other calls followed that we know of. It wasn't until about 10 p.m. when Stephen began to think that Wade might be saying the truth and is not on some sort of drug delusion. Stephen said Wade confessed to choking Christine after she fell asleep. Wade then admitted to stopping Diane for directions before he somehow convinced her to get into the car. And he choked her while he drove. According to Stephen's testimony, Wade claimed Diane was still breathing before he pushed her out of the vehicle and repeatedly ran her over. He was excited, Stephen said, adding how his son wanted to make Ruiz look like spaghetti. He wanted me to feel the same way he was, Stephen said. That really freaked him out. But what really freaked him out the most was Wade did not show any remorse. Stephen said he initially wanted to help his son, but his perspective changed when Wade began delving into detailed recounts of the slayings. Luckily, Stephen's better judgment took over, and he called the police. Stephen asked Wade for his location and told him he would send an Uber to his location to get him. Instead, Wilson's location was relayed to police, and he was arrested on October 8, 2019. Once in custody, things began to get even more interesting when Wade entered Lee County Jail.
You try me. You try me, bro. You try me, Dad. Always.
How did I try you?
You know, and it's so dumb. You always try me. You don't want me to have anybody in my life. That's crazy. You want to just kick everyone out on my life, bro.
Wait, save that shit. Don't get on fucking TV talking about I'm a God-fearing man and I've got 2 little kids. You haven't asked me one time about your fucking kids. Not one time. Now you're on fucking the media talking about your God-fearing and I've got 2 kids? You're a dumbass because your stupid ass did what you did. Your stupid ass admitted it, and now your stupid ass is on TV claiming you're innocent. You dumb bitch.
Oh, well.
Now your stupid ass is put it out on TV.
Hey, look
so guess what, you stupid ass.
Look how when I call you out.
With that.
Look how when I call you out, how you snap. You see what I'm saying?
You know what you call
when I call you out, you show your cards. You show your cards, Dad.
Ass kid.
You show your cards, Dad.
Couldn't control his anger.
You show your cards.
2 bitches, and now you're fucking claiming you need $8,000 for legal. You know how much money it would cost to defend your ass on murder charges? What do you think the state attorney thinks?
I guess it's a good thing I haven't. I guess it's a good thing I haven't been. I guess it's a good thing I haven't been charged with murder then, huh?
Confession.
I guess it's a good thing I haven't been charged.
No, you will be, unfortunately. You will be. And now, Wade, you're going to wear it because your dumbass can't keep your mouth shut.
Oh, well. What, baby?
Please insanity or something. What is wrong with
What are you... Can you hear me?
Plead insanity.
Huh? What, baby?
Plead insanity. Plead
I am.
Insanity.
No, baby, I'm going to, baby. That's what I'm doing. Baby, I'm going to. Baby, there might still be a chance for me. I'm not done yet. That's what I'm not done just yet, baby. Listen, I have people like contacting me on that machine, trying to like message me and stuff on there.
You're fucking Ted Bundy right now.
Apparently so. You know, there's going to be 2 things that happen. 1, they're going to find me not guilty by reason of insanity, okay? Or 2, they're going to fucking kill me.
We, the jury, find by a vote of 9-3 that Wade Wilson should be sentenced to death.
Wade was not only fighting 2 counts of first-degree murder, he had grand theft, battery, burglary, petty theft, and various other smaller charges under his belt at the same time, being found guilty for all of them. Now, the jury did say they voted in favor of the death penalty, but until, I believe, August 27th, so later this month, we won't know what the judge decides. If he is sent to death row, he will be yeeted over into somewhere in Central Florida with a bunch of other death row inmates. There's about 300 of them there, and usually it takes about 20 years for them to execute somebody. They really don't take any like real speedy routes when it comes to this in Florida. I was looking at some averages. It's like there's people that are sitting in there since the 80s still. So if good old Wadrakus here, as Jumpsuit Pablo likes to call him in his videos, if he does get sentenced to this death penalty, he will likely be spending a majority of his time alone. Probably absolutely bored to tears, no way to really interact with people, very little contact with the outside world. But I think he'll be fine. His commissary seems like it's fat. There's tons of women that have been sending in letters, and even men in the process here. And I will probably do a part 2 when the sentencing actually comes through, where I go into a lot of the prison calls, a lot of the other behind-the-scenes stuff that I showed a little bit in here. But with that said, we're going to end this one here and hopefully revisit it soon.
There's nothing worse than losing a loved one. But what if you had no information as to what happened to them? Well, the loved ones of Daniel Reeves would tragically face this reality in May of 2008. Daniel Reeves and his girlfriend Sarah were enjoying a night together in Madison, Indiana. It was May 3rd, 2008, and the couple were enjoying a nice date night watching a movie. They were at Sarah's house at the time. The couple went to bed, and sometime around 4 a.m., Sarah woke up. She noticed Daniel was not there, and she had received a text from Daniel saying nothing more than, "I love you." She tried to call him, but he was not answering his phone. This would be the last time anyone would ever hear from Daniel Reeves, and thus, the mystery as to what happened to him begins. Before I go any further, I should mention Daniel was last seen wearing a white or light blue t-shirt, brown steel-toed sneakers, tan shorts, and potentially a black leather jacket. Daniel had no known medical issues aside from mild social anxiety as claimed by his parents. He has dark brown hair and blue eyes. He is 5'11", and weighs about 145 pounds or so. Roughly about a week after being reported missing, Daniel's 1999 Chrysler Sebring convertible was located on Green Hill Drive, which is very close to Clifty Falls State Park. This park is a hiker's heaven. Many local college students and residents use these trails quite often in the fall and spring months. Daniel had much experience in the area as he was raised there. It is reported that he had even hiked in this area in the past. The real question is, though, why would Daniel Reeves decide to go for a hike at 4 a.m.? At the time, it would have been around 42 degrees outside. Since Daniel was last seen wearing shorts, this would surely not be the ideal hiking setup. When officials found the car, they reported it was unlocked, which Daniel's family thought was strange, as he would always lock his car, even in the driveway of his own home. Officials found Daniel's wallet, including all of his credit cards and IDs. However, Daniel's phone and car keys were nowhere to be found. The Indiana State Police searched the car as well. They claimed to have found nothing of worth, though. A search was conducted in the Clifty Falls State Park on May 10, 2008. Clifty Falls is a park full of railroad tunnels and caves, as well as numerous waterfalls. This can surely make hiking the park a real challenge at some points. The park, however, is rather small, only covering roughly 2 square miles. Nothing was ever found that could be tied to Daniel or his disappearance. Cell phone records show he has never used his phone since the last text to Sarah. The question as to what happened to Daniel Reeves still remains a mystery to this day. Before I end this look on the tragic disappearance of Daniel Reeves, I'd like to take a few moments to go over some speculation and theories I found while looking into this case. First off, I'd like to say I stumbled upon this case on Reddit from a write-up done by the user named By a Freeway I Confess. Essentially, this user's post shared the Charlie Project profile of Daniel and his case. I found this case interesting as it seemed to me that this may have been a potential suicide. The details kind of seemed to lead to that direction. But I of course never want to be the insensitive guy and throw out wild accusations like that with no proof. While I wasn't able to find out much from this, other than archives online, I did find a lot of theories on forum posts. Many of these theories focus on mental health. After some digging, I did find a section where Daniel's parents claim he had no medical issues or mental problems outside of small social anxiety. A few users on this forum post made the point that oftentimes parents aren't fully informed on the extent of their children's mental health, especially when they move out and start their own lives. Another theory mentions that it is very common to park further away from the entrances like Daniel did, as the park is small and limited to trails. Foot traffic off the beaten path would be scarce to none at all. These off the beaten path trails also take you into some extreme terrain that could easily cause death even for the most experienced of hikers. Ultimately, this story may never be solved. And that is what bothers me the most about these type of stories. I only wish I could know what led up to those final moments in Daniel's life that made him decide to take this hike. This case reminds me a lot of a story of John Glasgow, who disappeared mysteriously in 2008 under similar circumstances. John's skeleton was eventually found, but sadly, nothing will ever be understood of how he died. What do you think of this case? With the minimal detail shared with us, it honestly feels like a suicide story. This is just speculation though, so please be respectful in the comments. If anyone struggles with mental health and needs someone to speak to, the Suicide Prevention Hotline is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can call them at 1-800-273-TALK. Again, you can call them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at 1-800-273-TALK.
Reginald Johnson was a long-time resident of Wigan, Lancashire, England. It was his hometown, a place he seemingly knew very, very well. Norman was 70 years old when he would seemingly vanish into thin air. On the evening of March 29th, 2011, Norman would attend a dance class in a nearby town called Hindley. He would never return home from this trip though. Norman's partner, Colin Sweeney, claimed to have received a call from Norman at around 5 a.m. that morning. Colin said Norman sounded agitated and was claiming his car had been stolen. Initially, Colin thought Norman was probably confused due to his recent diagnosis of dementia. It would seem Colin's assumption was correct, as Norman's car was found in Hindley, only a short distance from his dance class. After this phone call, there would only be one solid sighting of Norman Johnson. This sighting came roughly 24 hours after he was last seen, sometime around 8:50 p.m. on March 30th, 2011. A ticket inspector on a train that was traveling from London to Wolverhampton feed a passenger traveling without the correct ticket. The passenger gave their ID to the inspector, who claims that it was Norman Johnson's. The inspector said this passenger got off the train at Birmingham, allegedly to catch a train to Wigan. Unfortunately, this sighting wasn't investigated until well over 6 weeks later, when Colin received a penalty fare notice at their home. By this time, no CCTV footage would be available, so it has never been, and will sadly, probably, never will be clear on what exactly happened that day on the train. If we could see this footage, we would certainly be able to see if that passenger truly was Norman. Regardless, police pursued the basis that it was Norman on the train that day. They believed he had become lost somewhere between Birmingham and Wigan, potentially getting off at the wrong station along the way. Since his disappearance, no activity has been detected from his bank account or credit cards. The family speculates that he may have died not long after he disappeared. Even though a body has never been found, in February 2020, the English High Court declared Norman Johnson legally dead. Even though it was agreed by the court that Norman likely died not long after he disappeared, the court ruled his date of death to be February 5th, 2020. This case is truly strange though. Why does it seem that there is more to the story than what is being shared? Colin Sweeney died in 2017, never knowing the fate of his partner. The strangest part of this timeline, though, is that if Norman truly was on the train from London to Wigan, that must mean at some point he travelled to London from Wigan, which would be around 200 miles out of his way. Then he would have had to come all the way back. In his confused state, I would think some people would have noticed. If anyone noticed a confused passenger, police have not disclosed them as far as I can tell. This case, like many others covered on this channel, does not have much information surrounding it. Regardless of that, I still wanted to share this case with you all. Sadly, Colin has passed, but I do hope Norman's remaining family can find closure and answers.
The case of Angela Hammond is genuinely a weird and tragic one. Angela Hammond was last seen in Clinton, Missouri at 11:45 p.m. on April 4th, 1991. She was talking to her fiancé, Rob Schaefer, at a telephone booth in a parking lot outside of the Food Barn store in the center of town, in the area of Jefferson Street and 2nd Street. Hammond told him she was too tired to meet him as they had planned, and she would go to their home and take a bath instead. She also told him a suspicious man circling the parking lot in his old truck had been watching her. Angela described him as filthy and a bearded man. She said he parked his truck near the booth and got out of it with a flashlight, as if he was looking for something. Suddenly, Rob could hear Angela screaming, and then the line went dead. Her car was later found abandoned in the parking lot. Rob immediately drove to the phone booth. On the way there, he passed a late 1960s or early 1970s model green Ford F-150 pickup truck and heard Angela scream his name. Rob followed the vehicle for about a mile on 2nd Street and Culvert Drive, but his own car's transmission failed and he had to stop driving. Rob said the truck he saw had a decal of water or an outdoor scene completely covering the rear window, possibly a white top, and possibly damage to the left front fender. Witnesses reported seeing a Caucasian man driving a similar truck near the telephone booth at the time Angela disappeared. The man, who has never been identified, was wearing coveralls and a dark-colored baseball cap. He had eyeglasses, a beard, and a mustache. A composite sketch of the suspect is posted with this case, as you can see. Rob himself was considered a suspect for a time after Angela's abduction and was given a polygraph test. He was cleared of any involvement, however. Angela's case has been linked to a few other Missouri women. Cheryl Ann Kenny, a convenience store worker who disappeared after locking up her store in Nevada, Missouri, around 70 miles from Max Creek on February 27, 1991. And Trudy Darby, another convenience store clerk who was in Max Creek, Missouri, was abducted from her workplace in January 19, 1991, 6 weeks prior to Hammond's disappearance. The store was also found robbed at $220 afterwards. Darby's nude body was found in the Little Neongwa River 2 days later. She had been shot in the head twice with a shotgun. Half-brothers Jesse Rush and Marvin Cheney were later convicted of the robbery and Darby's rape and murder. There are similarities between the murder and Hammond's abduction and Kenny's disappearance, but there is no hard evidence to link the cases. All 3 cases remain unsolved. There were some unconfirmed sightings of Angela, however, in several states, and even in Canada after her disappearance. At the time she went missing, she worked in a bank and also attended classes at Central Missouri State University in Warrensburg, Missouri. If anybody has any information on any of the cases presented here today, please be sure to contact the authorities.
Big break in the case of a Boston police officer found dying in the snow during the blizzard. John O'Keefe was found dead outside of a home in Canton over the weekend.
And the big shocker, his girlfriend from Mansfield now charged with manslaughter.
Could I have hit him? Did I hit him?
That's what the prosecution alleges Karen Reed told a friend after dropping John O'Keefe off at a home on Fairview Road in Canton.
What's up, everybody? I am back again looking into another rather recent and trending crime case. Since you guys seem to like the Wade Wilson series so much, I figured I would try to jump on these more popular and more recent cases, especially ones that are going through testimonies and all the fun stuff that court brings along with that, so we can stay on top of these stories and give you fresh updates multiple times a week. Anyways, today's story is another disturbing one. Not quite on the Wade Wilson level of disturbing, but this one is just as messy. This is the strange and downright disturbing story of Karen Reed and the murder of John O'Keefe. On a frigid February night a grim discovery awaited the town folks of Canton, Massachusetts. The quiet community, accustomed to the whispers of snow underfoot and the stillness of winter, would soon be shaken by a tragic story that would evolve into a haunting murder case embroiled in controversy, heartbreak, and mystery. John J. O'Keefe III, nicknamed JJ or Johnny, was born on December 8, 1975. John grew up in Braintree, Massachusetts, and graduated from Braintree High School and Northeastern University. He earned a master's degree in criminal justice from UMass Lowell, and he lived in Canton since 2014, where he was helping raise his niece and nephew following his sister and brother-in-law's deaths, tragically. John spent 16 years on the Boston Police Department force. In that time, John got to work with somebody known as Pat Rogers, who was featured on the reality television show Boston's Finest. Boston's Finest is an American reality TV series which aired on TNT and chronicled the daily operations of the Boston Police Department. The series went on from 2012 to 2013 and unfortunately only had about 2 seasons under their belt before it was canceled. This is only brought up because Pat Rogers at the time was dating somebody known as Laura Sullivan, who had a kid with him and was also longtime friends with John. Now, Laura would meet Karen A. Reed, who will become very important later in this story, and eventually would introduce her to John. They would start talking and subsequently kick it off and start dating. Now, a little bit of information about Karen Reed. She was born in 1980, grew up in the Taunton, Massachusetts area, and also lived in Blacksburg, Virginia for some time. She graduated from Coyle and Cassidy, a private Catholic school in Taunton, and went to Bentley University, where she graduated with a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in finance. She had been a financial analyst at Fidelity Investments since 2007 and was an adjunct professor at Bentley University. Karen lived in Mansfield at the time of John's death. John and Reed began dating sometime in 2020, like we mentioned. That brings us to the night of January 28th, 2022. John and Karen visited 2 bars in Canton, C.F. McCarthy's and Waterfall Bar and Grill. At the second bar, they met up with several acquaintances, including fellow police officers Brian Albert. Shortly after midnight, Brian Albert would invite a group of people, including John and Karen, back to his home on Fairview Road in Canton. The two would drive to the house in Karen's SUV, and this is where Karen claims to have dropped John off in front of the home and left because she wasn't feeling great. This is when a snowstorm hit Canton in the early morning of January 29th. Karen reported that when she woke up the next day, John had not returned home. After he did not respond to calls or text, she contacted an acquaintance from that night, Jennifer McCabe, who agreed to join her and another woman, Carrie Roberts, in looking for John. The 3 women returned to Fairview Road in Roberts' vehicle, where they saw O'Keefe lying unresponsive in the snow. Karen exited the car and began CPR. McCabe called 911 at approximately 6:04 a.m., and Canton police, fire, and EMS responded to the scene. John was transported to Good Samaritan Hospital in Brockton, where he was pronounced dead. A medical examiner later reported that John had abrasions to his right arm, several lacerations to his face, 2 black eyes, and skull fractures, which would have contributed to his brain bleeding. Now, while they did determine that hypothermia was a contributing factor to John's death, they recognize that that is not the entire reason John died that night. Karen theorizes that John was beaten inside the home and his body was left outside. However, there are 11 witness statements that say otherwise and also point to John never even entering the home. This is where the investigation truly begins to get interesting and a bit spicy. Massachusetts State Police Trooper Michael Proctor of the Norfolk State Police Detective Unit was the lead investigation for this case. He produced a series of written reports to Detective Lieutenant Brian P. Tully of the Massachusetts State Police. Now, according to police, pieces of a cocktail glass and patches of blood were found alongside John's body. They also found pieces of a broken taillight, which were said to match a broken light on Karen's car. It wouldn't be until February 1st of 2022 that Karen would be arrested. Her phone was taken into custody. She was charged with manslaughter, motor vehicle homicide, and leaving the scene of a collision in the Lower Stoughton District Court on February 2nd. Karen's attorney presented a theory that implicated Brian Albert, who owned the home outside of where John was found dead. They also tried to bring in his sister-in-law, Jennifer McCabe, who had been drinking with Karen and John on January 28th, and helped Karen find John's body the morning of January 29th. Evidence showed that Brian Albert sold his house and got rid of his dog after the incident, and Jennifer McCabe made a Google search, which was along the lines of "how long to die in the cold" at 2:27 a.m. In November 2023, several residents of Canton voted to mount an independent investigation into the town's police department. In January 2024, letters between the General Counsel of the Department Justice and Norfolk District Attorney Michael W. Morrissey were released, confirming a federal investigation was mounted into the Norfolk District Attorney's office. In March 2024, the Massachusetts State Police launched an internal investigation as well into the lead investigator in the case, Trooper Michael Proctor, due to the potential violation of department policy, but have not said whether that investigation relates to a specific case yet. On February 2nd of 2022, Karen was arraigned in Stoughton District Court on the charges of manslaughter, leaving the scene of a serious accident, and motor vehicle homicide. She pleaded not guilty and was released on an $80,000 bond. In June of 2022, a Norfolk County grand jury indicted Karen for second-degree murder, motor vehicle manslaughter, and leaving the scene of a collision. On March 12, 2024, Karen's attorney filed a motion to dismiss the case due to alleged conflicts of interest in federal crash reconstruction experts determining that John's injuries were inconsistent with the damage to Reed's car. The judge denied the motion on March 26 due to extensive evidence supporting the indictments, such as John's DNA being found on the broken tailgate of Reed's car. In early April 2024, just ahead of the trial date, the prosecutors filed a couple of motions, mainly requesting special restrictions during the trial to keep the media circus at bay. There was also motions that were trying to get passed that would prohibit anyone in the courtroom to wear any attire that says "Free Karen Reed" or anything like that. The judge approved a few requests, including the t-shirt thing, but the judge would say trying to keep people away, such as the media and whatnot, was a bit excessive. Obviously, there has to be a balance. There is the right to protest or demonstrate the defendant's right to a fair trial, but you also have to, try to keep the circus down to a minimum, of course. Now, Karen's trial was first scheduled to begin in March 2024, but was rescheduled to April. The trial wouldn't start until April 16th, with the jury selection taking a little bit longer than expected and going all the way to April 24th. Now, prosecutors previously asked the judge to block Reed's lawyers from arguing that the others are to blame for John's death, also known as a third-party culprit defense. The judge instead offered the defense a chance to develop their argument through relevant, competent, admissible evidence, but still barred them from using third-party culprit defense during opening statements. On July 1st of this year, after about 25 hours of deliberation, the jury was unable to come to a unanimous decision. Now, the judge would declare a mistrial, and the Commonwealth does plan to retry the case. Now, when that case will be retried, we will definitely keep you updated and continue to add to the stories. Now, there is a lot of information I definitely want to jump into when it comes to the police, first responders, the O'Keefe family, and witnesses at the bars, so we can get a better idea of exactly what went down that night. The O'Keefe family would take the stand for the prosecution. They would describe the relationship between John and Karen. Now, Paul, which I believe was John's brother, actually acknowledged that there have been several arguments between the two. Nothing too crazy and nothing too violent that he had witnessed, but Erin O'Keefe, John's sister-in-law, would say that she actually considered Karen a friend. When asked about the day when John died, Paul recalled seeing Karen in the hospital screaming, asking if John was alive, while she was being restrained by hospital employees. Now, obviously, this could be a distraught girlfriend who just found her dead boyfriend. Or this could be, a little bit of acting to make themselves look a lot less guilty. Canton police officer Steve Seraph, the first responder to the house and the crime scene, testified that Karen appeared to be giving John CPR and was visibly upset, repeatedly asking if John is dead and saying this is my fault. The defense pointed out that Officer Seraph's initial report did not include what Karen said, but included the statement when he testified to the grand jury in April 2022. Defense attorney Alan Jackson argued that not including the quote, "This is my fault" in the initial police report was an important omission. Now, 4 paramedics testified and told the court that Karen was saying, "I hit him," repeatedly at the scene. Canton Police Lieutenant Paul Gallagher, who was in charge of preserving the crime scene that day, testified that he and 2 other sergeants used a leaf blower to remove the snow and collected DNA evidence with uncovered solo cups and put them in brown paper grocery bags. They also claimed that it was not standard practice to do so. Canton Police Sergeant Sean Good testified that upon arrival at the scene, he observed the area, noting at least 4 inches, roughly 10 centimeters of snow and some pink spots which were possibly blood. He also mentioned they improvised methods of evidence collection using leaf blowers, solo cups, and grocery bags. Officer Good would also mention that they did not initially find the broken taillight glass, which was eventually found by John's body, and they also did not locate his missing shoe for some time. Now, a little bit more interesting stuff here is the medical and forensic expert reports. Richard Green, the forensic expert that testified on this case, said that John's Apple Health data from January 29, 2022 showed that he traveled 87.4 meters and took 80 steps between 12:21 and 12:24, and he was also on 3 flights of stairs between 12:22 and 12:24 a.m. Green also testified that Jen McCabe's Google search did in fact happen at 2:27 a.m. Justin Rice, who was the emergency room doctor who treated John at Good Samaritan Hospital, did also testify that John was unresponsive, intubated, hypothermic, and in cardiac arrest with no pulse. Justin Rice would also be the person who would order the blood alcohol test on Karen, who had been brought to the hospital under a Section 12 order. She had a blood alcohol content of 0.93, which of course is over the legal limit of 0.08. Nicholas Roberts, who is a member of the Massachusetts Office of Alcohol Testing at Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, discussed retrograde testing, a method used to estimate a person's blood alcohol level at an earlier time, using 12:45 as the estimated time of the last drink consumed. Roberts estimated her blood alcohol level would have been between 0.135% and 0.292%. During cross-examination, the accuracy of the estimation was questioned, noting that if Karen continued to drink after 12:45 a.m., the results would be inaccurate. Medical examiner Dr. Renee Stonebridge said John's injuries could come from either a fall or a traffic collision. And another medical examiner, Dr. Arini Scordi-Bello, described the autopsy findings and noted that the manner of death was undetermined as she did not have enough information. She noted that the injuries are not immediately lethal, but he could have been incapacitated. She said John's injuries could come from a fall, being hit with a blunt object, or even being hit with a car. When asked if the injuries are consistent with being hit by a car at 24 miles per hour, She said, "It's likely, but also unlikely at the same time." Now with that all said, we once again come to that July 1st mistrial. After the jury being deadlocked after several days of deliberations, writing twice to the judge that they cannot reach a verdict, the jury sent one final note, writing that fundamental differences in their beliefs are making it nearly impossible to reach a unanimous verdict. So, as for now, we will continue to follow this story and hope that we will find something out in January 2025, because that is the only thing that I can see scheduled for her next trial.
The Lava Lake Murders. An infamous gruesome triple murder which took place sometime in January of 1924. The bodies were found months later in April of the same year, making it very difficult for the medical examiners to pinpoint an exact time of death. The victims, 50-year-old Edward Nichols, and 35-year-old Roy Wilson, and 25-year-old Dewey Morris. The three men were known trappers. Morris and Wilson were loggers by day, and Nichols served as a caretaker for the cabin and some fur foxes, which were all owned by Edward Logan. The men lived in the cabin and maintained it during the winter for the owner. Not long before their deaths, Nichols was reported to have told Bend officials that trapping was going well for them that season. The last confirmed sighting of the group was reported by Alan Wilcoxon, a resort owner who snowshoed to the lake where they were staying. He spent the evening with them and left the following morning of January 16th. Nothing was heard from the group for some time after this, so a small search party of 3 men, including Morris's brother, went to search for the group. From what a 1961 Bend Bulletin article writes, the table was set and food was on the stoves, as if they were prepared for breakfast, which is rather an odd detail. A cat, emaciated but still alive, was found in the cabin. The search group estimated the animal had been there trapped for months. 5 foxes owned by Logan were missing from their pen. Even odder yet, they still had food in their pen. The searchers found some other eerie things as well. They found a bloody hammer in the storage shed. They returned to Ben and brought the owner to the cabin the next day because they were now very worried for the group's well-being. Local sheriffs also joined the search. Roughly a quarter mile or so from the cabin was Big Lava Lake. The searcher went there next to discover that the group's sled was half submerged in snow, and the sled had a massive bloodstain on it. The 3 men of this search had experience in the woods. They noticed a dim trail leading out to the middle of the ice-covered lake. At the end of the trail, they found a hole carved in the ice, though it had been refrozen since being cut, and a brown human hair was found nearby. They had to wait until the next day to confirm what was already very clear. Once the ice had been hacked up, 3 bodies were pulled out. The bodies were fully dressed but badly mutilated. The official report says each had been shot in the head with a revolver and raked across the upper part of the body with a shotgun charge. Other evidence found included 4 expertly skinned fox carcasses under a tree near the cabin, as well as a patch of snow with human blood, hair, and a tooth. Suspicion fell onto a man named Lee Collins, also known as Charles Kimsey, because one of the trappers in the group had accused him of stealing a wallet a few days prior. Kimsey had said he would get him back for that. Kimsey also knew the area the bodies were found in fairly well. Here's where many theories have come into play in an attempt to explain this truly odd case. How could one man take on 3 healthy grown men at once? The element of surprise is a factor, sure, but would that truly be enough to take out all 3 men? One theory suggests Kimsey had an accomplice to help him. Melanie Tupper, an author of the book The Trapper's Murders, suggests that a man by the name of Ray Jackson Von Buren could be the guy who helped him out, but this man also committed suicide in 1938. My personal theory is somewhat like the others. I don't think one man could have taken 3 men down in such an easy fashion, even with a gun. Seeing as two separate types of guns were used, it would be hard, if not impossible, to shoot two at once. Could they have been asleep and were shot in the head before the body shots for good measure and then drug out to the sled to be dumped in the lake? Or were they already out by the lake when they were ambushed? These are my main questions. I think they were asleep. Kimsey came lurking in the night with weapons and bad intentions, possibly with or without friends to help him. He entered the cabin and pumped bullets into everyone's head, and proceeded to drag them via sled to the lake and toss them. This case will more than likely remain unsolved, but the rumors and theories will forever fuel the flame to know more. Crestline, California is a small mountain town located in the popular San Bernardino Mountains of Southern California. Like most of the towns of the mountains of San Bernardino, there is a sizable amount of second homes or cabins that are only used on occasion by the owners, making the community a very quiet and peaceful place to live. The dense woods on the mountains allows for secluded cabins to be tucked away among the trees. The Boles family was just one of the many part-timers on the mountain. They had recently purchased a small cabin on the outskirts of town to escape the hustle and bustle of Orange County on the weekends. The weekend of August 13th, 1965, the family of four had piled into the car and made their way up the winding mountain roads to their new slice of tranquility. When James, 41 years old, Darlene, 37 years old, and the two boys, Tommy, 13, and Bobby, 12, hadn't returned to their full-time residence in Orange County by Monday, the 16th, extended family started to worry. The cabin was newly built and still didn't have a phone line to call. The mothers of the two parents grew increasingly concerned that they called Darlene's brother, Floyd, who in turn contacted the construction company who had built the cabin to see if they could go by and check on the family. Floyd never heard back. Next, he contacted the San Bernardino Sheriff's Office, who said they would pass on the wellness check to a local substation. But again, Floyd didn't hear anything back. Completely frustrated, Floyd decided to check himself and ask an employee of his familiar with the area to go with him. Floyd and his employee reached the cabin at about 5 p.m. Once there, they noticed that neither family car was in the driveway and walked up to the deck to look in the windows. Through the window, Floyd saw Barbara, the family dog, in the couch covered in blood and not moving. Floyd tried the door and found it unlocked. He entered the small cabin, and the couch was covered in blood, and so was everything else. He was moving towards the master bedroom. He saw what had become of his sister and her family. At 5:10 p.m., the two men sped off and found the nearest sheriff's substation to report the gruesome discovery. When the investigating officers arrived, they found the scene exactly as Floyd had described it. The family dog dead in the living room along with papers of slippers, shoes, and socks on the living room floor. The four family members all dead in the master bedroom, each riddled with bullets. James was laying on his back on the floor, and the bedroom in the pool of blood. 13-year-old Bobby was found in a sitting position, back to the wall. Darlene was found in a crouched position in the closet, indicating she had been shielding her youngest son Tommy at the time of their deaths. Detectives found blood smears in the living room and the dinette area, which seemed to lead back to the bedroom. 35 .22 caliber shell casings were found in the cabin, 5 in the living room and 30 in the bedroom where the family was slain. Blood smears on the bedding in the master bedroom seemed to indicate that a weapon may have been wiped clean on the bed. Detectives were also able to find footprints in size 11 men's in the cabin. Detectives searched outside the cabin for footprints, but it had rained Sunday, the night before the bodies were discovered, so they had no luck. The wallet James carried was found in the cabin but contained no money, which seemed unusual. About 65 yards away, the car was located and detectives staked it out for a while in case the suspect returns, but again, no luck. The local paperboy confirmed that the car had been there since at least 6 a.m. on Sunday, August 15th, when he did his morning deliveries. When the bodies of the family members were examined, each one of them had multiple gunshot wounds. All had numerous fatal wounds to the head and the chest area, as well as wounds to the limbs and extremities. A canvass of the area turned up very little, as most other cabins within reasonable distance were part-timers and had been empty that weekend. The only exception is the first day of canvassing was the Ogles, who had seen James on the evening of Saturday the 14th. He seemed in good spirits and they had chatted for a few minutes before they said their goodbyes. The Ogles hadn't heard anything unusual, but said they probably wouldn't have if there was a very large party happening a few streets away, and they would have been trying to ignore that noise. Another witness said family ate dinner at the local San Mortis club Saturday evening, and James seemed visibly upset after making a phone call. Yet another contact stated James had told them the family was going to have a visitor around 8 p.m. on the evening of Saturday the 14th. Detectives contacted many other full-time residents of the town and part-timers who may have been around on that fateful weekend. Also questioned were friends, family, and co-workers of the couple detectives, but they didn't get any potential leads. No evidence was ever able to be conclusively tied to anyone either. Several suspects with no motive were questioned and interviewed, but in the vicinity they were vetted and cleared. Darlene's ex-husband, Harvey M. Fulton, was also a suspect. Rumors abound at Hughes Aircraft where that Darlene and James worked that Fulton had harassed them. Even Darlene's family also had a suspect to point at. The most promising suspect came in the form of George Robert Stewart, who was wanted on a mental warrant from Alabama, where he was suspected in the murder of the Evans brothers, two young boys he had molested while living with their family. He had worked at a church camp on the mountain in a nearby town of Twin Peaks. The camp confirmed that they had been closed that particular weekend, so he was free to do as he wished. He had been diagnosed as psychopath and had strong religious fervor. In 1967, the sheriff's department was advised that Stewart was now wanted for child molesting and interstate flight to avoid persecution. Now, he was arrested in September 1967 in Arlington, Texas, and detectives flew down to interview him. He was given a polygraph test and showed deception in the results, but continued to deny involvement. Having no hard evidence to tie Stewart to the murdered family, except the possible motive of meeting the young boys, and possibly following them home, the detectives had to leave. Mobile took Stewart back to Alabama to question him in their own investigations, and he was released on bail in Alabama after a witness in his molestation case refused to testify. Stewart is currently serving time in Illinois related to sex crimes against children. The brutal murders of the Boles family is still unsolved.